What's up? My name's Owen Girard. I'm a Gen Z conservative political activist, and I'm fighting to get America First congressional candidates to go to Washington and represent their districts with honesty, integrity, and purpose. And you're watching Making Waves, the Florida Report.
So we just had the election heard around the world, or at least here in the state of Florida. We just held three special elections across the state, and some of those results were pretty surprising to those of us in the know. So we're going to be talking about the results of those special elections on this episode of Making Waves, the Florida Report. And I'm going to be doing it with a couple of my special guests. I'd like to first introduce Liv Caputo. She is currently the immigration reporter for the Florida Phoenix.
Hi, Jill.
I'd like to welcome back to the show a good friend of mine, Tracy Caruso. As you know, she's the wife of former state rep Mike Caruso, but she is currently one of the commissioners on the Palm Beach County Healthcare District. Welcome back, Tracy.
Good to see you, Joel.
So, guys, let's dive right in. I'm sure you guys were just as shocked as I was at some of these results from last Tuesday. Okay, it's a special election, and I've been involved in one of those, right, for Congress. It's no cakewalk. I mean, a lot of your constituents, a lot of even your most ardent supporters, they forget to vote. You got to know what day it is. It's not your normal day. But still, for me, I mean, was shocked, to be honest with you, at some of these results. Liv, what's your overall sense of things? I mean, when Tuesday night came to a close, could you believe your eyes, or were there some real surprises there?
To be fair, it is a special election, as you mentioned, and we are approaching the midterms, which is also a time where you don't see as much turnout from Republicans. You don't see as much attention on these elections. So there is more room for upsets. To be fair, though, there were three special elections. Two of those involved flip seats. So that was pretty surprising. Probably the most surprising was Senate District 14. We had Josie Tomkow, who was supported by the entire GOP machine. She had raised a lot of money. She had a lot of support, and she still lost. Now, does that mean she's going to lose in November? Not necessarily. There's going to be a lot more turnout, a lot more money involved. So we'll see where that goes. But I guess the best way to answer your question would be to say we do expect to see some changes, some upsets during special elections, but it was still a little bit surprising for sure.
Well, and Liv, we've got a guest on today who knows one of the districts very well. Tracy, of course, we're talking about your district. We're talking about District 87, where the great Mike Caruso held down that seat basically until he was term limited for a full 7.5 years. And of course, the seat was vacated when Mike was appointed to the Palm Beach County Clerk's office by Governor Ron DeSantis. Any overall thoughts before we do the deep dive into District 87? Obviously, we're going to pick that one apart because you know a lot about that. But when you look at the three results in general, any first thoughts on when you saw those results?
I was very surprised by the two flip seats. Although because I do live in this area, the District 87 one, I had been hearing, and I'm in Palm Beach County, so I had been hearing some thoughts from people as time was going on, and I knew that it was kind of that it could be lost. I still was surprised that it happened though. Josie losing, I think, was a complete shock to me. I thought that she would have been a shoo-in. Um, I couldn't believe it. I was floored.
Well, and we're going to do a deep dive into each one of these districts, some more than others. But let me just say from the get-go, yes, the results overall to me were stunning. But at the same time, you know, I live in a district, you know, District 3 up here in the Panhandle. We live in a deeply red district, you know, highly Republican area that I live in. And up here, the voters, they do like to send messages. So I had a feeling, I had a gut that you were going to get some messages delivered in these special elections. But boy, what a message. What a resounding message. Let's go back to Tracy and let Tracy break down District 87 for me because, you know, John Maples, God bless him. I mean, we all heard that he was not necessarily native to District 87. And from where I'm sitting up here in the Panhandle, we've kind of had a slew of that sort of activity lately. We've had Republicans kind of anoint candidates and they kind of drop them into these districts, not just at the state level, but at the congressional level as well. Was that part of what was at play there in 87? I mean, what was your sense on the ground? What were the voters telling you about what was going to happen in that race?
Well, I think that the problem with John Maples is that he really didn't understand the district all that well, and he is around the area. It's not like it was a completely, one part of the state to the other part of the state. Lake Clark Shores, where he lives, not exactly far away. He knew a lot of the Palm Beach County people. This wasn't it wasn't a totally alien kind of a thing, but I just think that he misread the district. And I think that because he had so much support from the party, and he was the anointed one, I think that the thought was that it was just going to happen for him. It was a district where, I don't know if you guys know this, but Trump won by 11 points when he ran last time. Mike Caruso won it by 19 points. So I think that there might have been, they might not have, if you really break it down, maybe the reason why we had that seat was because the people of this district really liked Mike Caruso. He obviously got support from people that were not just Republicans. He obviously got support from a lot of people here who, whether they were MPAs and Democrats, he got a lot of support from everyone, and that's why he was in. Whereas John Maples seemed to only go for the Republican vote, and I don't even think he got all of that when all was said and done. But it is a special election, as Liv says, so it's an unusual thing anyway. The results might have been different in if it was a regular election.
And Liv, when I was following the race, I followed it on social media. But the only people I saw really rallying around John Maples were kind of the extreme wing of the party, right? You had MAGA Meg, who, that endorsement cuts both ways, obviously. It might be good to some Republicans, but it's certainly going to cut when you're trying to attract NPAs and maybe some moderate Democrats. Were you hearing among your reporter friends? I mean, was this always a race that you guys were going to be following closely? Did you or your colleagues ever envision that maybe Emily Gregory could squeak that out, or did you think this was a slam dunk?
We pretty much thought that Maples was going to win the special. I mean, nobody's for sure on anything, but he had the support of Trump. Emily Gregory, she's a first-time Democratic candidate, so it's also Trump's district. To be fair, it is Palm Beach, which can go either way sometimes, but still, we did think it was Maples. I think an important point to make here is turnout percentages. As Tracy mentioned, when Trump won the district by 11 points, I think there was roughly like 75% turnout in that district. When Mike Caruso won, I think it was around 60%. This time, I think it was 28%, 27% turnout. So you're going to see those numbers fluctuate a lot when you have low turnout. That's always something to really focus on when you're looking at elections and when you're looking at election results, especially for Republicans who do have a little bit better turnout overall. So when you see turnout that low, you're going to have fluctuations. You're going to have changes. You're going to have unexpected things happen. Maples also had some issues, some residency issues, which cropped up. But again, sometimes those are pretty minor in special elections. Again, it all comes down to turnout. It all comes out to what the voters are seeing, whose names they're seeing pop up. And sure, yeah, it can reflect where voters are at. Maybe they're unhappy with current Republican leadership. Maybe they're just not paying attention. It's going to be hard to know until we see the midterms, until we see the general, and until we see higher turnout numbers.
Well, and going back to you, Tracy, because it's good to have you physically there in Palm Beach County in the district. What was word on the street? I mean, was Emily Gregory, was she a known commodity? Were people afraid of her? Were people willing to give her this chance? Or was it just that they knew Emily more than they knew John? I mean, what was the sense there in the county?
No, I don't think that Emily was a known person, but I heard that she was an extremely hard worker. I heard that people who met her found her to be very impressive, so she was obviously well spoken. Um, I haven't met her personally, but I did hear some very good things and very positive things about her. I also, when I really thought that there was going to be a problem was when John Maples, when they found out that he didn't really live in the district, and then they said that he was living in this place in Palm Beach Shores, and they were questioning this, and they screamed racism. That's when I
Yeah.
knew that problem. That's when I knew that she was a real threat because it seemed like a very, very weak type of thing to say. And it was like he got busted for doing something that he shouldn't have been doing. And the immediate reaction was racism. And once you do that, I think you've lost the plot. I think it's something that Republicans have accused Democrats of doing for many years. And then the opportunity comes the other way around. And that's where you, oh, racism. Okay. So, but it was true. So I knew there was a problem.
Well, Tracy, that's a really good point because Liv, you probably are aware of the text messages that the Gregory campaign sent out to voters in Palm Beach County. I actually didn't get a copy of that text until it went viral, right? Until it hit the news and until Sam Garrison and the Republican Party of Florida started crying racism, right? It's one thing to send those texts, but the Republican response actually kind of drew attention to the fact that John Maples didn't actually live there. Maybe it was something that would have flown under the radar. Maybe I wouldn't have even known about it. Liv, I actually went out and got a copy of the text just so I could make my own mind up. So, what do you think about that? Did that strategy kind of backfire on the Republicans a little bit?
When you have one certain thing go viral and it's not necessarily a positive thing about the candidate going viral, it's not usually a good sign. For special election candidates, of course, it's really important to define yourself, to get out in the community. Gregory did a fantastic job of that. She built a real grassroots movement. She was knocking doors. People knew her name. She was getting out the vote. I spoke with her, I want to say it was last week, and she told me how it started off with just her husband and 3 friends going through the neighborhood, talking to people, building a
Mm.
real community, getting her name out there. To be honest, I don't know if Maples did the same. I know he had the Trump endorsement, which does carry a lot. People, that's how you get your name ID up. If the president of the United States is tweeting about you, that's usually a good sign.
Tracy, listen, I can't leave District 87's results behind without pointing out the fact that you already mentioned the great Mike Caruso last won that race. What was it, 2 years ago? And he won by 19 percentage points. Again, we normally don't think here in the panhandle of Palm Beach County as being a Republican enclave, but
Mhm.
certainly your husband Mike made it a Republican enclave. And so, what a flip to go from 19% on the R side to a Democrat gain. So, and Tracy, I also have to mention you would have won it by 20 percentage points.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say what would have, what could have happened. I've been there myself with this kind of thing. I lost an election a few years ago in Delray Beach by a very small percentage. And there's a lot of things and a lot of, reasons that I could have blamed it on. But the fact is that at the end of the day, it's really all on me. It's all on the candidate and what they do. And you can't turn around and point fingers and say, oh, it's because it's because this. It's all on him. If he had done something differently, the results would have been different. I don't think he can blame it on anyone else. He certainly got more party help than I've pretty much seen anyone ever get. Um, Ever. Me personally, this is the most party help I've ever seen anyone get. He had every resource available to him financially and otherwise, and he managed to lose the president's district. It's incredibly embarrassing. Don't know how you, I don't even know how you come back from that. It's embarrassing.
Tracy, I stand by what I said. You would have won that race. And listen, I still have my Caruso yard sign in the garage. You just tell me when to deploy it, okay?
You can relax, John Maples. I'm not doing this, but There certainly will be other people that run for the primary or the regular election because they were not happy with the performance that John had. And there are a lot of really great people here. I mean, a Republican should win that seat, I think.
Well, and with that, we'll move on. Liv, there was a fairly straightforward race over in District 51 where Hillary Holly, the Republican nominee, won that special election. That was the seat that was vacated by Josie Tomkow, so that she could in turn run for a vacated state Senate seat. Hillary Holly, who I don't personally know, I've never met her, but apparently she was able to bring home victory for the Republican Party. She won, I believe, by 9 percentage points, whereas the previous election, Josie Tomkow won by 14. So are we starting to see a trend here, or again, do you think it's just a special election thing?
It's so hard to tell, and it's so hard to speculate, and it's very hard to do one-to-one comparisons from special election to a general election, especially if we're comparing this year's special to a 2024 general. 2024, we had the presidential election. We had Republicans were kind of riding this all-time high in terms of voter registrations and a red wave. They were coming off of 2022, which was a great year for the Republicans statewide. So it's a little bit hard to compare 2024 to this year, especially when it's a general versus a special. I will say HD 51 represents a lot of Polk County. Polk County is very red, so it's not hugely surprising to see Hillary Holly win that. To win by 9 percentage points versus 14 in a general, it's going to be hard to compare that until November, and then we'll be able to see more. It is fair to say that in the midterm elections or the midterm year overall, historically, the party that's not in power does tend to do a little bit better, just tracing back. So we'll see if that trend holds. I mean, it's certainly holding nationwide right now for special elections. We'll see what it looks like in November.
Think that I think that Liv brings up some very good points, but I think there's something else that we need to consider. So when Josie won the last time by 14 points, and you saw and Mike Caruso winning, they were not new candidates; they were incumbents. They already had years of work behind them. They had the name ID. I personally would never expect a new candidate, a new Republican, to win by as many points, whether it was a special election or a regular election. These people are new; they're new to the seat, and you just wouldn't expect them to have as much. I don't think that 9 points versus the 14 says anything or means anything in terms of Republican, Democrat, or anything else.
Well, I tell you what, that makes plenty of room now for us to talk about the main event because, as you guys know, Palm Beach County, a lot of things can happen in Palm Beach County. We expected Polk County to stay red, but guys, the one that really caught my eye, I think I'd already gone to bed. I was not expecting to get the call that Josie Tomkow failed to win her special election in Senate District 14. For those of you that don't know, that was the state Senate seat held by Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins previously. Jay had actually won that seat in a general election by 10 percentage points. But Liv, I don't believe historically that state Senate seat tends Republican. I think Jay might have flipped it when he ran. But again, to me, that was the shocker. That was the one. This Brian Nathan, Liv, I don't know him from Adams. So maybe you can tell us what was going on there in the Tampa area. I mean, was this another case of Tom Cal being handpicked and being a little bit of an outsider because Polk County isn't exactly Hillsborough County? Or was this just simply a matter of, again, special election politics where you get what you get?
This one's a little bit closer and a little bit harder to tell than HD 87, for example. Republicans are pretty confident, or at least the ones who I've spoken to, that they think they'll be able to flip HD 87 back red. I'm hearing a lot more hesitance or a little bit more worry about Senate District 14. So what I had heard prior to Governor DeSantis calling this special election, because it took him a while to call the election for SD14, was that one of the reasons he hadn't done it yet is Republicans were worried they were going to lose the seat. They were worried about the amount of money it was going to take to keep it red, because you're right, Collins did flip it. And it's an off election year, it's midterms, it's a special. They were a little bit worried. So then Tom Cow, she did raise a lot of money. You had all these Republicans funding her campaign. She had way better name ID. She was technically an incumbent because of the neighboring district, but her other issue was she was still living within HD 51 when she was running for this election. She actually wasn't going to be officially living in SD 14 or resigning her HD 51 seat until it was either the day before or the day after the general special election. SD 14 was surprising because Brian Nathan really didn't raise a lot of money. Democrats didn't really put any money into his campaign, period, because they expected Tom Cow to win that. Is she going to win in November? She's going to have a lot more money, a lot more support. Coming off of a loss, she's not going to be happy. So that one will be a really interesting one to watch during November.
Tracy, what are your thoughts? Because again, Brian Nathan, I mean, you talk about the ultimate outsider. I've never heard of him.
Now, I've never heard of him either. But I will say that for Josie, she, I believe, does live in Tampa. She's married to her consultant who lives in Tampa. So even if she kept the residency in Polk County, she's been in Tampa. She's been around and doing these things. I mean, she didn't just, walk in off the street, from nowhere. There's got to be people there who know her. And again, somebody with that much support, this was incredibly surprising to me. And I think even if they were a little bit worried about the seat, I don't see why they'd be worried about her. She's, in leadership, she has a lot of support. I think the most surprising thing that I've seen since these elections is how many people have blamed, other people for these losses. John Maples had the endorsement from the president of the United States. You could easily argue that he wouldn't need, he would not need someone else for that, right? Um, and for Josie, she had all of the help in the world, and she's not in a good position. This is really inside stuff, but you guys know that she's not in a good position with the governor and with the lieutenant governor. And I think that the fact that they stayed out of it doesn't mean that they did anything against her. I just don't think that they were obligated to drag anyone over the finish line, and they shouldn't have needed to. They had so much help. They had more help than anyone, and she raised a ton of money. And she's a great campaigner. I mean, one thing I can say about Josie for sure is she's an incredibly hard worker. She's very good at campaigning and very seasoned. This isn't her first rodeo. I'm baffled.
Well, and that brings us to the reason, ladies, why I called this meeting, right? Because the viewers out there, bottom line, they want to know, are these the warning bells sounding? I mean, is this result, is this indicative of a bigger event that's coming in November? They want to know, is there a blue wave coming to Florida in the state legislature? I mean, could Florida, I mean, Lord knows me and my counterparts, we fought so hard to turn this state red and to keep it red. Are we in danger of seeing Florida go purple again? And so we're going to give yes, no answers. Okay. So to the big question, is Florida going to turn purple? Do these results have bigger meaning? Liv, we start with you. Did these election results, do those elections have a bigger meaning, and do they portend an upcoming Democrat upswing in the state of Florida? Yes or no?
Probably not. No.
Tracy, your turn.
No, I just followed the rules. I said no.
All right. So now you're putting
didn't
me on
want
the
it-
spot.
Going with no.
All right, so now you're putting me on the spot. So do these elections have bigger significance? I'm going to give a cautiously worded yes. I'll start by explaining my answer yes. What we've had in the state of Florida, particularly up here in the Panhandle and even over in Congressional District 6, what we've seen in the state of Florida for the last 2 years, we've seen Evan Power and the Republican Party of Florida basically tell voters, this is your candidate. Whether you like them or love them or hate them, this is your candidate. Similar thing happened to me up here in Congressional District 1 when I ran against Jimmy Patronis. That election, in my opinion, was almost stacked from the get go. You had a situation down in Congressional District 6 where Randy Fine was more or less handpicked for that congressional race. We're seeing it up here again with some of our state races. I think the Republicans who elected Trump, I think the red wave that Ron DeSantis created here in the state of Florida, because there was a red wave. I mean, I was a recipient of that red wave back in 22 and again in 24. So there definitely is a red wave in Florida, but I think Republicans run the risk of squandering that red wave when they don't listen to the constituents who put them in power in the first place. And right now, at least in the Florida Panhandle, a lot of constituents, a lot of diehard Republicans, for that matter, a lot of NPAs, they're feeling neglected. They're being taken for granted that they're just going to turn up. I had a patient in my medical office just the other day who just moved here from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And he moved here because of Ron DeSantis. He voted for me back in 24. He's proud to vote for me. But when I asked him about these upcoming elections, Liv, he said, look, it's like I've got a devil on this shoulder and I've got a devil on this shoulder. You're not going to convince me that one devil's better than the other. I'm just going to sit this one out. So I'm afraid, ladies, that what we may run into coming up in the general of 2026, we may see a lot of our Republican voters and a lot of our NPAs who normally don't get involved. My fear is that they may stay home.
If it does happen, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. If you look at in the legislature, Republicans hold a massive supermajority in both chambers. These flipped seats are not going to make a difference this year or even in November because, again, I think it's 85 Republicans to maybe 35 Democrats in the House, and then something like 28 Republicans to 10 Democrats maybe in the Senate. Those numbers are somewhere around there. So it's not going to make a huge difference there. Republicans also have around a 1.5 million voter registration lead over Democrats. Sure, that doesn't count for NPAs, but you would need a hefty amount of NPAs to break for Democratic candidates to compete with that Republican advantage. Now, is it fair to say the Democrats are probably going to make more ground in the midterms? Sure, that's fair to say. And maybe we will see in a few years that voter registration lead to start to balance out a little bit. That's possible. But as for this immediate year, an immediate change in the Florida legislature, I don't think we're going to see that. I think Republicans have a very comfortable lead.
Tracy, what do you think we're going to see in the upcoming 26th election?
I think my answer was a no because of the same reasons Liv gave. It's the numbers. We have a super majority in the legislature, but I do think we will lose. I think we'll probably lose about 10 seats. But if we lose 10 seats, it still doesn't make a difference. We don't have the same super majority would have, but we'd still be a Republican legislature. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think that we lose some seats, but I don't think it's enough to kill it. I find it hard to believe that we're going to lose all of those seats and suddenly be Democrat. I don't see that happening.
Well, and ladies, I definitely don't see Florida turning Democrat, but more along the lines of what Tracy said. I think we lose the supermajority. How many seats we lose, I guess, remains to be seen. Uh, my advice to the Republican Party, my advice to the Republican voters, I think we have to run the right candidates in these races. I would say my advice to the Republican Party of Florida, you got to have honest to goodness primaries once again. Primaries are not something to be afraid of. Primaries are where the voters get to kind of decide, and the candidates themselves get to duke it out. And usually it's the best candidate that survives and moves on. Good Republicans should be able to go mano a mano in a primary and may the best man or woman win. So my advice would be, let's put more faith in the primaries. Let's have honest to goodness Republican primaries, because in my opinion, that's the take home message from Tuesday. You've got to elect and you've got to nominate the best candidate, not just the candidate who's next in line, not just the candidate who, hey, it's my turn now.
I certainly agree with you about the idea of anointing someone and picking someone. I think that you lose a lot of good people that way. Um, but what happens once in a while, and they should not be surprised if they see it happen in these upcoming races. And I think it's the best thing that could happen is there will be people who say, I don't really care that the party is saying not me, I can't do it. There's going to be that guy who says, I'm going to just do this anyway. They're not going to be afraid to do it. And they're going to come out and they're going to win those primaries. And those people might turn out to be the best legislators that we could ever have in Florida. We don't know.
Well, ladies, listen, it doesn't get much better than that. We had a reporter from the Florida Phoenix. We had Tracy Caruso, who's right there on the ground in District 87. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you both for coming on.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much. I
Joel.
appreciate it.
It was great.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast now Republican candidate for Congressional District 2, Keith Gross. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, and Keith, you're actually from your district, right? You're actually from Panama City, Florida, which right off the bat for most Republicans, that's got to be a big plus, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Panama City, or in Southport, for those of you who know where Southport is. I grew up in a family that lived in a trailer when I was a kid out in Southport, so spent my life right here in the Panhandle.
Well, and Keith, we've just spent the first 30 minutes of this episode talking about the recent special elections here in Florida, which were, for the most part, Republican losses. And we were talking about how important it is to listen to the grassroots voters, to not have this anointed class among Republicans. Voters don't like to be told how to vote. They want choices. And one of the points we made was the fact that the people who went down in flames, the Republican chosen ones, they were trying to represent an area that they didn't even live in. So your thoughts on that? Being a Panama City boy, I would like to think that you would know what's in the best interest of your congressional district.
I'd certainly like to think that I know what's in our best interest here in our community. This community raised me. This community gave me everything. And I see running for this office as my way of giving back to the community that gave me so much. I've lived the struggles of everyday life. I know what issues we face on a day-to-day and a year-to-year basis, certainly some of the challenges that we face. So I'm hoping that I can bring real change by using this seat in Congress to help the Panhandle District. And, you mentioned voters don't want to be told how to vote. And I feel that way 100%. Endorsements are great. We like endorsements, no doubt. But at the end of the day, voters want to make up their own mind about who they think is going to be the best fit. And that's why I've been spending the last couple of months going to counties all over this big 16 county district and meeting with people face to face, because I want to have conversations. It's important that I earn their vote, that they decide. I want them to be able to decide who is the best person to represent them. And I certainly hope that they can look at my past accomplishments and my business career and see that I've built things. I've grown national companies from the ground up multiple times now. And I hope that they'll trust me with their vote so that I can bring some change through Congress.
So, Keith, our podcast actually has viewership across the state. As you know, I'm a former state representative, so you're being watched right now in the halls of Tallahassee. Uh, Set the table for those viewers who may not be familiar with Congressional District 2. As I alluded to earlier, we're talking about the area that includes Panama City. We're talking about Port St. Joe, Appalachia, all the way to Tallahassee and beyond. Set the table for our viewers who may not be familiar with our district. Let them know the current political lay of the land, who you're up against, and let them know what's important to the people of Congressional District 2, because that's a very unique part of the state.
It is a unique part. So it's a gigantic area. First of all, it's 16 counties. We've got part of Walton County, so about 1/3 of Walton County, and then all the way over past Tallahassee into Jefferson and Taylor County. It goes all the way down to Perry. So if you draw a line, 1/3 of Walton County over to Perry, state line to the coastline. So we've got rural farms, we've got Interstate 10, we've got everything up to the state line up there. And then, of course, we've got commercial fisheries and tourist beaches and all sorts of infrastructure. We've got shipbuilding. We've got multiple military bases. It's a very diverse district with lots of diverse industries and income streams. It's got a lot of diverse challenges as well, everything from droughts, wildfires, agricultural needs, to the fisheries regulations that need to be reduced and the tourist industry that needs to be protected by stopping, drilling right off of our coast, which could have adverse effects. And, we can go on and on, but the reality is we've got a lot of things that we have to pay attention to here in CD2. In the Panhandle District, it's also one of the heaviest veteran populations. And so when we look at VA care and we think about how these people have earned the care that they are promised by the government, too often they wait in line for months to get the care they need. I've lived that firsthand. My grandfather was paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair for most of my life, well, for all of my life, I suppose. And we had to drive him from Southport, Florida, all the way down to Tampa because that's where his specialist was. And it wasn't until his last few years of life that they finally agreed that it was unnecessary to drive him all the way to Tampa, and they'd let us take him to the Navy base here in Panama City Beach. So it's that sort of silly bureaucracy that I hope to be able to cut through as the next congressman here. You said lay out kind of the field of competitors currently because Dr. Neil Dunn, he is retiring now. And after he announced retirement, I announced that I was going to run for this seat. Shortly thereafter, several other people also said they're going to run. Of course, we won't know who's really running until the official act of putting yourself on the ballot, qualifying, happens in June. But there are a lot of people now who say they will run. I believe there are 8. We've conducted significant polling. We hired Signal Polling after we met with the White House. And the Signal polling shows that we're ahead. We're leading by double digits. If you were to add up all of the other people in the race, we would still beat all of them combined into one. And I hope that we can maintain that lead because the reality is most voters are still undecided. It's early in the race. Our primary is on August 18th. Early voting starts August 8th, but August 18th is the primary. It's important that we get people out to vote, and it's important that I meet as many voters as possible, which I am working hard to do every day because it's up to them. I'm hoping I can earn the votes. I'm hoping that I can be selected by this district as their next congressman because I know I will do a good job and I hope I can help them in every way I can.
What's interesting about your race, Keith, after you announced, as you said, you had a few other people throw their name in the hat. Uh, what's curious is we were talking about the importance of having the right candidate, a grassroots Republican, someone that the local community can actually rally around. And in the case of your race, you are literally running against a lobbyist. I mean, you are running against a professional lobbyist. You are running against the swamp, basically. And it's a lobbyist who also happens to be chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. Now, between you and me, Keith, and all the viewers out there, how fair is that? I mean, to me, that's almost like being a football player and you show up for your game and you ask, hey, who am I playing today? And they say, well, you're playing the referee.
Dr. Rudman, I'll tell you, it's more than unfair. As you mentioned, I'm running against someone who is a lobbyist and the state party chair. So let's talk about the lobbyist part first. For a long time, we've been frustrated as citizens. We, the people, feel like our voice gets diluted by lobbyists who go up there and they buy our representatives. Now, a certain candidate in this race is hoping to shortcut that process. And rather than have a lobbyist buy the representative, he just hopes he can be the representative and sort of cut the middleman out. Very clever, I suppose, if you're a lobbyist. So as it relates to his state party chairmanship, he is certainly using that position to gain an unfair advantage. And, as I've mentioned in an FEC complaint that we sent, it's also an illegal advantage because the reality is he's using party relationships, party donor databases, and party funds to propel his campaign forward. There have been multiple mailers, which I suspect many people who are watching this podcast received, everything from birthday cards that say, from Evan Power, and it has a massive picture of Evan Power on the front, and then the tiny little text that says, paid for by the Republican Party of Florida. And then he's recently sent fundraising letters that were very similar. He sent other communications that were there were now multiple mailers. So he's easily gotten a benefit worth more than $100,000 for this mail. And the primary purpose of the mail is clearly to promote Evan Power. You see, the FEC, they use a primary purpose test. They literally measure the text. If the text Evan Power is huge and the text Republican Party of Florida is tiny, they say it's clear, just based on the face of the document, that the primary purpose of this document was to promote Evan Power, not the Republican Party of Florida. And then you got to think, okay, well, why is that illegal? It's illegal for two reasons. The Republican Party of Florida raises a lot of money from corporations. Federal candidates cannot accept money from corporations. When the Republican Party of Florida spends money to promote a candidate, it can only do that in a federal election to a certain extent. So they can only give Mr. Power $5,000 in-kind donations or cash. Right now, they've given him in-kind donations well over $100,000, and he keeps doing it. He's been doubling down. I'm hopeful that the FEC gets involved. Certainly when someone's on notice and they continue violating the law, the FEC does have the authority to bring criminal charges, and I think that's a possibility here because of how flagrant his scheme is to launder corporate donations through the party for his own benefit.
What we've seen, Keith, in other races, my own race, for example, I ran in the special election for Congressional District 1, and now we're hearing the same thing in other congressional races this year. We're hearing about candidates that have been more or less locked out of events. We're talking about lifelong Republicans. In some districts, they've gone to the Republican Party uh, annual meeting or the quarterly meeting just to find that the doors are locked to them because they're running against the preferred candidate. So they're not considered loyal Republicans anymore. Have you found that you've been blacklisted from certain events, certain official Republican debates? Maybe you found you're not welcome at certain Republican meetings because you are going up against the Republican chairman, or has that not quite hit your district yet?
So there are certainly some of the groups in Leon County where Evan is most tightly connected that have not been welcoming. They have been intentionally refusing to allow me to speak, but that is a one-off thing. Fortunately for me, it's pretty hard to block out the guy who is clearly the front runner. And I've been invited to speak at all of these other Republican groups and meetings. It's been really nice to be welcomed. There is a debate scheduled. It's for May 4th. And I'm sure that I will be on that debate stage because, again, it's pretty hard to ignore the front runner.
Well, and Keith, let's talk about the lay of the land for a second. I happen to be coming to you from just inside District 2. I'm coming to you from our vacation house in Seaside, Florida, and so I can tell the viewers personally just how wide ranging the interests are in your district. I mean, you go from resort communities to fishing communities and oyster harvesting communities, and then you have the rural areas where maybe healthcare might be more of an import. But the one thing I think of, right or wrong, when I think about your district, I think about the natural resources, right? I think about, obviously, first and foremost, the beaches of the area. And what comes to mind, Keith, was what you guys lived through a few years back with Hurricane Michael. And I guess my concern would be knowing that you guys have lived through grief, you've lived through severe hurricanes. If you're a voter in District 2, who do you think is going to be first on the scene? Who do you think is going to know what you're living through? If you've just survived a catastrophic hurricane, do you want to call someone who grew up and is from Panama City, whose house is probably also affected? Or do you think those people are going to want to call a lobbyist in Tallahassee?
I mean, you're making a good point. I've lived through, well, a lot of hurricanes throughout my life. And, certainly Hurricane Michael was by far the worst since Hurricane Opal. Hurricane Opal, when I was a lot younger, that was a pretty significant one too. And to your point, I do understand these issues because I've lived through them. I've made a whole lot of coffee on Coleman stoves because we didn't have power for many days at a time after some of these storms. So I understand what it means, and I understand how we need to motivate agencies like FEMA in DC to get involved and do a better job. I'm also living through the current issue with property taxes and property insurance and how all of that has gone through the roof. Property insurance is now almost unaffordable. It's making housing unaffordable for a lot of us in our communities here in the Panhandle. And some of that can be handled by the federal government. We can reduce regulation and we can stop government spending, which has driven up inflation. You got to remember that part of the reason insurance costs so much is because the cost of materials has gone up. Anybody that's bought a 2x4 recently and bought one, say 6 or 7 years ago, might have noticed a little bit of price difference, just a bit of inflation there. Insurance companies are pretty smart when it comes to number crunching, and they have increased their costs to match the cost of construction. Cost of construction is driven by excessive inflation. So we can try to get that under control by stopping government spending. And the big thing that we can really do with the federal government to reduce insurance costs is use FEMA as a reinsurance program. So much of our insurance premium is actually going to be spent by our insurance companies buying additional insurance for themselves called reinsurance so that they're only responsible for a smaller portion of the potential loss. We can use the federal government and its emergency functions through FEMA to take that loss directly, cut the middleman out, reduce the reinsurance requirements, and it'll reduce our cost as homeowners. But moving on past Panama City, where I've spent most of my life, I moved around the country a bit when I was growing some national companies, as you can imagine. But I live in Panama City now. It's where my forever home is. It's where my whole family is still based, and it's where our current congressional district's representative is also based. Our current congressman, Dr. Neil Dunn, he is a veteran and he lives in Panama City. So I am hopeful that we will elect another veteran of Panama City because it's the largest group of Republican voters in the district. It's the largest single county. But beyond that, you said Apalachicola. It is a hidden gem. Recently, fortunately, the oystering industry has been reopened. They suffered a lot of closures for a lot of years. And so much of it was due to a lack of water. I remember the lawsuit between the state of Georgia and Florida about that water. I'd like to see how we can ensure that the oystering industry is expanded and protected, because now that it's finally open, we can't let that community get decimated again by losing that massive resource.
Well, and you mentioned the fact that Panama City is home to Tyndall Air Force Base, which a lot of people may not realize is one of the most important bases in Florida. Now, I live in Congressional District 1, where we are just ripe with military. I mean, as a physician there, I take care of mostly military families. But let's don't underestimate Tyndall Air Force Base, too, and what they accomplished there. Tyndall took quite a hit from Hurricane Michael. But I understand you also have a military record that the voters might be interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually lead with the fact that I'm a veteran because I think there are so many veterans who deserve that praise way more than me. I was in the Army National Guard. I did not deploy. And so I feel like, the real honor should go to those who deployed, particularly those who were injured in a deployment. Those are the veterans that I think of when I think of a veteran, even though I am a veteran myself. And it's important that we do a better job taking care of these people because they put their lives on the line. Sure, I was willing to, but I ultimately did not deploy and wasn't asked to be in the line of fire. These people did put themselves in the line of fire, and they deserve all the care they were promised and then some. Tyndall Air Force Base, as you mentioned, was recently rebuilt, multi-billion-dollar rebuild, and it's important that we maintain that mission here. It's some of the best flight training area that we have in the entire country out over the Gulf of America, where they can test, unique procedures, unique materials. And that's a really important part of training because you got to train in realistic scenarios. You've got to train like you're going to fight. We've also got a mission there that's a little less flashy, but one of the most important missions in our country, and that is our air defense system. So air defense after 9/11 didn't only look outward for threats coming from the outside. Now they track aircraft all over the interior of the United States. And so that's an important mission that I think is often overlooked. But the infrastructure there, the importance of that mission, we should be expanding that. We should never be talking about cutting our military. That's one of the very few things that constitutionally the federal government has a pretty clear-cut role in national defense. I want to cut a lot of things out of the federal government, not defense.
And Keith, it's hard for me to mention Congressional District 2 and Panama City without mentioning the elephant in the room, right? Over here in Congressional District 1, we are represented. We are represented by a congressman that I affectionately refer to as a carpetbagger, right? Because Jimmy Patronis is not from Congressional District 1. He doesn't know anything about Congressional District 1. He's not a Pensacola boy. He's a Panama City boy. So when you got into the race for Congressional District 2, I assume you probably thought Jimmy was going to resign and run for the seat where he naturally would want to represent. I assume you probably thought this was going to be a Keith Gross versus Jimmy Petronas match. But I want your thoughts on that and what your mindset was, because surely you were getting ready for kind of a heavyweight showdown. And just the fact that it didn't materialize, Keith, I think that's what Republican voters are sick of. The fact that, hey, wait, we can see the chess pieces being moved. Maybe the entire reason Jimmy ran for congressional District 1 is that maybe the people pulling the strings already had this play drawn up in their playbook. And I was just curious about your thoughts on that.
I do kind of wonder that now, in retrospect, if that is why perhaps there were some chess pieces being moved to make sure that the Congressional District 2 wasn't occupied so that maybe a certain state party chair could run in there and grab it, because it seems to be what he thought he was going to do. The reality is, when I announced that I was running for this seat, it didn't have anything to do with who else might run. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If I ever want to be my hometown congressman, it's now or never. I'm 42 years old, and whoever wins this seat will probably hold it for at least 10 years. And that's why, this is a now or never seat for me.
Well, and Keith, obviously you know what you're doing. I mean, you're a very qualified candidate, being a local boy, being a businessman, being a veteran. Thank you for your service, by the way. Um, you sound like the kind of Republican that voters are just begging for. We don't want lobbyists. We don't want yes men. We want people who are America first. And certainly you've done a great job of getting that point across, a great job of getting your message out. I'm one of those people that you're trying to reach, right? I may not vote in Congressional District 2, but I drive up and down Congressional District 2, and I've seen your fantastic billboards on Interstate 10. And I'm sure thousands of voters have seen your billboards. So I wanted to spend just a minute focusing on that, because even though it is about votes, it is about connecting to the population you represent. Let's be honest. The reason money is important in a congressional election is because that's how you reach the voters, right? A person like your opponent, he's not going to go door to door. That's beneath him. He's going to spend millions of dollars, ethically or unethically. He's going to flood the mailboxes. He's going to flood the airwaves. Please tell me that you have the resources to mount an adequate response, and please tell me that we're going to see more things like those billboards and more things like you getting out the vote and really putting your foot on the gas.
We're definitely running a full spectrum campaign. We're doing marketing across all mediums. We're on TV. We've got dozens of billboards across the district. We've only got 2 on the interstate, because I figure most of the folks driving on the interstate are probably not from around here anyway. So all throughout the district, we've got dozens of billboards, and we've been on TV for now about a month. And we're going to keep doing that. We started slow and we're going to ramp up. So far, we have probably spent more than most of these candidates are going to have for their entire campaign budget. And, I've been very blessed in business, and I'm using a lot of what I've earned in business to move this campaign forward. Like I said, I'm a guy that grew up in a trailer in Southport, and I went on to found multiple national companies. So that puts me in a position where I can pledge $5 million of my own cash, at least, to put into this race. So, I have done that, and I've made true on my word there. And we're going to run a campaign that ensures we stay in contact with the voters. And, money isn't everything, but people need to understand that it's expensive to run a race. When you buy one of these billboards, they don't send you a bill next month. They say, you want a billboard between now and August? Great. Here's your invoice, all due upfront today for $30,000, because you've got to pay for all of those months in advance, plus the printing costs and the install. It's very expensive to run a well-marketed congressional campaign across 16 counties. And that's what it takes, because people need to have the information in front of them so they can make an educated decision and decide who they think will represent them best in Congress. I think someone who has accomplished a lot in their own life is probably someone I would trust with my vote, as opposed to someone who maybe hasn't ever had a real job, or whose only career has been working by spending the donations of other people instead of earning a living, creating jobs, and building something useful.
People across the panhandle will tell you that the Democrats have the absolute wrong plan for America. They're afraid the Democrats are going to get back in control. And as you know, we've just had a couple special elections dealing with local seats in Tallahassee. and they have not gone the Republican way. Uh, People want to hear that we've got the right candidate. People want to hear that we've got someone that can actually promote Republican turnout. Because what we've seen in these special elections, Keith, this isn't a Democrat wave, right? People aren't taking a second look at the Democrat Party. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that the Republican Party is getting away from their grassroots. They're getting away from the voters who elected them in the first place. Voters are looking at people like Evan Power and they're saying, he doesn't speak for me. What has Evan Power ever done that's benefited my family? We can barely make our mortgage payment this month. Our insurance rates are going up. Our health care is unaffordable. My kids aren't going to be able to work in their hometown, and they don't see Evan Power as being someone who gives a damn. So, so Keith, my fear isn't that you lose to Evan Power. My fear is that we as Republicans lose congressional district 2, uh, just because the other candidate seems more like they care. And certainly that would be the case if we end up with an Evan Power. We're going to have Republican voters that stay home. So I want you to appeal to those Republicans who have given us tremendous victories in the last several years. I've had a front row seat to some of these DeSantis victories where he won by 20 percentage points. Tell us what you're going to do to keep the momentum moving.
Well, I think you're right about Republican apathy when they don't feel like they really chose the candidate or when they don't feel like the candidate speaks for them and comes from their community. I've grown up and built companies and I've seen how government stands in the way and how all Democrats ever want is more government, more power, more money. So, I think we've seen a real shift in the Republican Party since 2015. When Donald Trump came down that escalator, everything changed about the Republican Party. We did away with this establishment cronyism like Dick Cheney, where they were using his company Halliburton and the U.S. Treasury basically to line their own pockets by selling $600 sheets of plywood into our Iraq war. So I think a lot of us became disillusioned with that sort of crony capitalism that was characterized by the old school establishment Republicans. And the new type of Republican is America first. That's what we want. We want a government that actually puts Americans first, that closes our border, that revamps our immigration system so that it works to the benefit of Americans, not every other nation on earth. And Democrats, when they had power just recently, of course, they threw the borders open. They let in 10 to 30 million illegals. We don't even know how many of whom were never encountered or vetted in any way, and many of whom then the sitting president, the Otto Penn himself, gave this fake asylum to. These people were not asylum seekers under the law, but they bent the law unconstitutionally. They ignored their duty to secure our border, and they gave these people the ability to come into our communities, to take our jobs, to harm our people, to commit countless crimes. And now Democrats are trying to keep them. They're trying to block voter ID because they want them to vote, and they're trying to stop deportations because they want them to stay. We can't allow a Democrat to get back in power because that's going to change everything for the worse for this nation. Republicans are on the right path generally. I sure wish they were going a lot further and a lot faster. But the reality is, when you compare that to the Democrat vision for America, there's no comparison at all. The Democrat vision is absolute destruction of this country. And so we need someone sent as our nominee for this congressional seat who voters are going to feel energized and motivated to get out there and vote in November, who can also win the non-party affiliated voters, because that's what we don't talk about enough. It's not Republicans and Democrats alone. There are tons of independent, non-party affiliated voters. And if we can't win those independents, we will lose. That's what happened in South Florida recently. NPA voters broke 2-1 in favor of Democrats. If that happens, even in a bright red district, it's possible for the Republican to lose. I take nothing for granted. While I am the front runner in the polls right now by double digits, by a long shot, I'm still working hard every day because I think it's important that I earn everyone's vote, that I earn your support so that we can work together after I'm your congressman. We can stay in touch and work together. And I can do a good job of representing, because that's what it's about, representing what the people in the district want.
Keith, listen, I'm gonna be way more blunt than you. I don't see any path for Evan Power to win a general election in Congressional District 2. If you vote for the wrong candidate in this Republican primary, if we have smug lobbyist Evan Power trying to represent people in Sopchoppy, I think we lose the seat to the Democrats. So if you want to continue Republican control, if you want a Republican in charge of Congressional District 2, ladies and gentlemen, I think you're looking at the man right here on this podcast. So Keith, let our voters know where they can reach out and maybe contribute to the campaign, or maybe find out more about you.
Certainly, I would love it if you could all go and follow me on Facebook. We're very active there. That's where we publish our events. And you can follow me on Facebook at Keith Gross FL. I'm also active on X, formerly Twitter, at Keith Gross. And we've got a website, keithgross.com, where you can opt for a yard sign. You can make a contribution. You know, while I've pledged north of $5 million for this race myself, I've actually raised a lot of money from a lot of people. Most of them are small dollar donors. And that's important because that's a way that I can show the establishment that the people are behind me, because dollars mean votes. And if you're willing to give me $5, that tells the establishment that you're probably going to vote for me too. It sends a signal to everyone. And I hope that you can find a way to offer your support and follow the campaign. I'd love to see you at an event.
Keith Gross, thank you for joining us here on the podcast, and best of luck. Like I said, you're up against the swamp. You're up against literally a lobbyist. So we really need you to bring this one home, and I know you will. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.